KOC,
HD3 Detroit,
KJAQ,
HD3 Seattle,
WBMX,
HD3 Boston, and on AOL Radio and Yahoo Launchcast. Psychic Radio is now CBS Radio's The Sky. Back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Call now 248-545-SOUL. New skyradio.com. Believe.
Do electronic voice phenomena really convey spirit voices through recording devices? If the speakers really are spirits, how can they talk without vocal cords? What does sophisticated analysis of EVPs reveal?
Well, hey dear, and welcome to the 140th broadcast of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I'm Ben, and that guy you just heard was my co-host and partner in the paranormal, my dad. And if anybody can answer those questions, it's tonight's guest. Certainly one of the sharpest tools in the paranormal shed.
Indeed. Making his first appearance on the CBS edition of our show, but his third appearance in general, is our good friend Philip J. Imbrogno, scientist, author, educator, and paranormal investigator for over 30 years. His multidimensional universe theories provide a whole new look at the paranormal, and his thinking on the subject corresponds very much to our own. His most recent book, brand new, is Files from the Edge, a paranormal investigator's explorations into high strangeness. His other books include Ultra-Terrestrial Contact, a paranormal investigator's explorations into the hidden abduction epidemic, Interdimensional Universe, the new science of UFOs, Paranormal Phenomena and Other Dimensional Beings, and Night Siege, the Hudson Valley UFO sightings. And there are probably more. We were talking before we went on, and Phil writes more books than I ever have time to, so maybe there are more. He has collaborated with other well-known authors on other books and has written many articles. Phil has been interviewed by the New York Times and Coast to Coast AM. You've seen him on NBC's Today Show and the Oprah Winfrey Show. He has also been featured in documentaries on the History Channel, A&E, Lifetime, and HBO. He worked closely with many top UFO investigators, including the late Dr. J. Allen Hynek and our good friend Bud Hopkins, the renowned expert on alien abductions. Phil has a B.A. degree in astronomy from the University of Texas, Bachelor of Science in Earth Science from Northeastern Boston College, and a Master's in Chemistry from Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He has been a science educator for the past 26 years, and undergraduate, of course. Yeah, I just mentioned his degrees. Okay, so Phil's an educated guy, and here we are, and we want to welcome him back to Behind the Paranormal.
Well, thank you, guys. Good to be back.
Okay, Ben has our first question, Phil.
Right. There's been a lot of controversy about EVPs on this show. What have you found in the study of EVPs?
You know, initially I was very skeptical about it and the way that it's received and the fact that, it's scanning through these radios that scan through a crowded AM band and just pick up voice messages of responses of just one word. But I have to make it perfectly clear here that, EVPs, have been made popular by, all of this ghost hunting. However, UFO investigators were picking up EVPs much longer than people were picking them up and going out to cemeteries and saying, anybody want to talk to us, which I find ridiculous.
Yes,
people would go, UFO investigators, they would get involved, including myself, get involved with some of these bizarre contact cases that, stem back into families for years and generations. And during some of these interviews, while taping on the old type, cassette recorders, you would get voices that you didn't hear in the room. You would hear other types of electronic phenomena or kinds of noises and so on that were not in the room. And this happened to me on 2 occasions. During my, investigations into the contact phenomena from the 1970s into the 1990s. It happened twice, and I know it's not being done by magic. It's being done by obeying the laws of physics. But the question is who is doing it? Now we have a whole new resurgence of EVP, people going around with digital recorders claiming that they're picking up voices of ghosts, And also they have these devices now that are called ghost boxes, which primarily, they scan the AM band and, like I said, and pick up random messages from supposedly they think the other side. But I think we found out a lot different than that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, there is, of course, obviously it comes up all the time because we deal mainly with, we deal a lot with the quote-unquote ghost hunters, a term that I detest, by the way. And we even have we have a good friend locally here, and he's on our AM show in New England once in a while, and he plays EVPs that he's gotten. And of course, as we often note, they are 1 or 2 word answers, generally, sometimes more. But the question has arisen on several occasions by the more thinking type of people whom we have on, which we try to emphasize, and that's I don't know if you remember the Ted Sirios phenomena. I actually met him in the early 70s, and he was a fellow who could look into the lens of a camera, and I actually saw him do this, and he could project whatever image was in his mind onto the film of the camera. Sometimes he didn't even need a camera. He could just look at a packet of film, and it would automatically develop. It was bizarre. And one wonders, if that can be true with that sort of media. Is it possible that the investigators are projecting onto the recording media some sort of wishfully thought or laughingly thought EVPs? And what's your opinion on that? Do you think it's possible that maybe some investigators are actually projecting these things?
Well, the only way they're projecting it is if they're hoaxing it. And
that's true.
Possible.
Because we're talking about vocal cords here.
Yeah, but, photographic film, putting images on there, photographic film is susceptible to, photonic energy at various frequencies, especially the films from those days. They vary. The sensitivity varied quite a bit. But when we're talking about a radio receiver that's only tuned to a specific frequencies, that's an entirely different story. Plus, the voices are different. And one thing that, I was very skeptical about this until I started experimenting with it and heard some EVPs and went to places on investigations and ran the EVP, then later played it back, and was pretty surprised as to what I was picking up. But what was being picked up did not convince me that they were people from the other side, spirits trying to communicate with us. It seems to me that many of these voices could be coming from parallel realities. And this opens up a whole new avenue of research. But the thing is that if these parallel realities are out there, these other dimensions, theoretically they would be curved in time and space away from ours, and radio waves would not be able to transverse across these dimensional gaps under normal circumstances. So we have a mystery here, but I have a number of ideas. I've done a number of experimentation. As you know, I have access to the labs up at MIT, and I go up there during the summer. And I brought some stuff up there and ran it through the computers and analyzed it through, high-tech oscilloscopes, some of these EVPs. And I'll tell you, it kind of spooked me out as to, thinking, where is this stuff coming from? The thing is that, when these radio ghost boxes scan across the AM band, they are scanning an area from about 520 kilohertz all the way up to like 1640 kilohertz in a matter of a few seconds. That means that, anything coming in there, scanning that would have to have a bandwidth of considerable, have a large bandwidth.
True.
Now, the EVPs coming in, you could hear the voices, and they say words, and probably sometimes 2 or 3 words together, I've heard, and 4 words. They are that signal's being put there on a very wide bandwidth. So, it's impossible to think that at that scanning rate, some of the background AM signal from the voices that you hear are actually, responding to you, and, it's just coincidence to hear the words. You shouldn't be. All you should hear for those words is just choppy stuff. But these voices come in solid, and they are across a considerable bandwidth of about 120 kilohertz sometimes.
Wow.
They're 120 kilohertz. Now, this is one of the, I think, verifying it. These are actually coming from somewhere else and not just bleed over from the AM band.
Okay. What I don't want you to stop here. It's fascinating. Can you extrapolate further? I mean, where or when are they coming from?
Well, let me put it this way. The way the signals are received, we have to start from there. And the way the signals are received are very interesting. I ran the signals through an oscilloscope that be able to divide the frequencies coming in, the number of frequencies divided into, 0.0001 kilohertz. Now, these signals are very weak to begin with. But these signals are not coming in on the thing. They're piggybacking on the normal AM signal. Now, this is a phenomena that's known in radio for a very long time. For example, in the old days of ham radio, if someone next to you threw a dead carrier, it means just transmitting a signal with no modulation on it, that signal reaches your antenna. It's very strong if this person's close by. But in the background, you could hear fainter signals from much further away that are piggybacking on that signal to get to you. And as they piggyback on that signal, they're being amplified and they sound distorted, they sound strange, but they're from stations that are much further away. These EVP signals on these ghost boxes are actually piggybacking on the AM signal. And, this is fascinating just to think about that. Where are they coming from?
Yeah.
Well, okay, we have to go into the idea that, let's say that these signals actually respond to the person. You ask a question, and you keep on asking a question, they will give an answer, whoever it is. This means that they can hear you, and you can hear them. How is this possible? Well, the oscillators in the radio itself could actually pick up a voice signal, and it could transmit back over the piggyback signal on the AM band directly in the path to whoever is transmitting. Now, I asked a question once, you have to say this. I said, can you say my name? And there was a little bit of delay, and they came back and said, Philip, Phil. Now, how do you get something like that if it's not, if it's all, just a coincidence? And it repeated a number of times. And I asked, what do we have to do in order to receive this signal? And the voice came back and said, do you have faith that you can do it? I mean, these are long signals. I mean, and there's other things that have come in. For example, we were in one house. Rosemary Guiley and I were in a house in Putnam County, and they were having a lot of strange phenomena. So we bought the box. Now, the dog there, whose name is Lucy, seems to react to whatever is going on there. I think it's some type of dimensional portal that's taking place there. Well, we ran the EVP, and Rosemary says, is there anything else that you want to say to someone here? And the voice came on and said, Lucy. Now, how do you get something like this, by coincidence? It's impossible. On one occasion, there's so much EVP that I've got stored right now. I was saying, I said, where are you from? And the voice came back puzzled and say, I'm from America.
Oh, okay. I'm so fascinated there. I didn't see we got a break coming up here, Phil. We're going to have to take a break here on Behind the Paranormal with Phil Imbrogno. Fascinating conversation about EVPs, and we'll be right back. Stay with us.
CBS Radio's The New Sky. NewSkyRadio.com. Across the Veil with April Lugo.
Join April Lugo each Tuesday night at 7 for Across the Veil. Across the Veil is a show that promises to be a unique experience as April connects and communicates with those who are across the veil. April receives guidance and wisdom from the ancients, angels, masters, teachers, and guides, as well as hearing messages from those who have preceded us across the veil, family, friends, and loved ones alike. The program is an excellent opportunity for you to hear from those who are across the veil. April will be answering questions and giving insight. That's the main reason for the program. Across the Veil at 7 Tuesday on The Sky.
Look up to the sky. Psychic Radio is now CBS Radio's The Sky. Reach out. NewSkyRadio.com. Is now CBS Radio's The Sky. Back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Call now 248-545-SOUL. NewSkyRadio.com.
And welcome back. And our amazing guest this evening is Phil Imbrogno, scientist, author, paranormal expert par excellence of the thinking variety. That's the kind we like. And we're talking about EVPs, electronic voice phenomena. Now, Phil, you were talking about the tremendous wavelengths that are required here for these things and your research and the AM band and simply how we're beginning to talk about how conversations seemingly take place between investigators and whatever they're talking to. And my first question in this segment would be, what does that mean? Does the guy on the other side of whatever have a radio too? AM, what's going on here? How does it work?
Well, it may be. think of this, of one explanation. I've heard some things, for example, I've asked, what is your name? It has said Johnny. Where are you? I'm in America. Now, and you get some indications that, that whoever's communicating is actually doing the same thing you are. What if, in this new field of theoretical physics, it talks about parallel realities, that every decision, everything that you do, everybody does, creates these alternate realities. Now, what if these realities, these alternate realities, actually exist, and somewhere in another reality, there's someone doing the same thing that you are in the same space, but at a different reality, a different level of existence, so to speak, and the oscillators in the radios are actually connecting, and they're doing the same thing you are, because sometimes it sounds like they're surprised to hear you. But that's one explanation, but I don't think it's one explanation as to what's causing the voices in EVP. I think there's many, many different things happening. For example, when you start the EVP session, especially with radio, what happens is that as you go on, you seem to get different communicators. Different types of beings or different types of entities or different types of intelligence, human or otherwise, I don't know, that they keep on shifting in and out. Now, you may be doing the same thing. I can give you an example. For example, in ham radio, in the old days, there was something called skip. Okay?
Yep.
So skip is where, your signal bounces off the ionosphere, and nobody in between could hear that signal, but you may be talking to California, to New York, but people in Texas can't hear your signal because it's skipping like a mirror across the ionosphere. But as the sun rises and starts ionizing different parts of the atmosphere, you start getting different states, and the other states start fading out and disappearing. This seems like it's happening with the EVP on these radio receptions. It seems that different realities or different dimensions are popping in and out, and you may not be talking to the same individual that you originally talked to. So, it's more complex than I think than any of these paranormal investigators who use it ever think of. That it's very, very complex.
Oh, we couldn't agree more. Of course, we're among the few who actually use the multiverse idea when we do paranormal work. When we go on cases, this is the basis that we're doing it. We don't believe in spirits of the dead and all this. I mean, these are people, and you get to know them. It's really interesting. Now, let me throw this at you and see what you have to say. Back in my first case, 1970, 1971, was this relatively well-known case now in northeastern Connecticut in the Lost Village area, so-called, of Pomfret, where there was it seemed to be a constant din of human activity from somewhere or somewhere else. You'd walk in there, and at least most of the times we were there, you'd hear dogs barking, people talking, and the farm implements banging together, wagons rolling down the road, and you couldn't see the wagons and things like that. And we got to know the history of the place and the names of the people who had lived at various periods. And I felt as though I knew these people. And they were just people, and I believe it was entirely multiverse-based because they were just going about their daily lives. We happened to be in a place where we could hear it and that sort of thing. There are two things I want to ask you about that scenario. On the first night we were there, it was a very hot August night, 1971, we heard the laughter of children rather close by at a brook, and it was moving up and down this brook in a rather unnaturally quick manner. And we had, of course, this is, again, the early 70s, the ghost hunting, the term didn't even exist yet. And we were trying to record this on an ordinary cassette tape recorder. And it was very sensitive for its time, and we got nothing. So here's an example of, instead of stuff coming out in the form of EVPs on your tape recorder that you didn't hear with your ear, here's stuff with your ear that you couldn't record, or at least, what say you on that?
You know, that's interesting. That means that, of course, that there are certain receptors in the brain that are picking up stuff like this. And it's very possible that, you know, we're talking about the past, present, and the future coexisting together. And, you know, this is also another theory going on in theoretical physics. I mean, these new equations are coming up with time displacement, time machines, and time travel. I have cases that I've investigated where people have encountered people, not ghosts, but people from the past, and they just, you know, had conversations like they were real people, and they disappeared.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, this happens. This stuff happens. For example, in what's personally happened to me during my investigation out in the Stone Chambers in Putnam County and, you know, New York.
Putnam County, New York. You're right.
Yeah. Now, there was one time where I heard a Celtic flute. This is deep in the woods, far away from any house, a Celtic flute.
Sure.
And it was so loud that I couldn't find the origin from it. Where could it be? It was sound like it was right in my ear. But I didn't have a tape recorder to see if it would tape or not. And then I just sat down and just listened to it and wondered, and then it faded away. Now, a month later, I was showing a friend of mine the Stone Chambers in Putnam County, and the flute started again. And she heard it also and saying, my gosh, you know, what is this? Where is this coming from? I said, I don't know. This is one of the phenomenons where these chambers, they may mark almost like portals to these other dimensions or other realities where some of this stuff is going on, and it filters into our world somehow.
Maybe that's why the chambers were built there.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why, because they're not randomly placed. They're built on incredible negative magnetic anomalies.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, they were built, they're not randomly placed. They were built there to mark something. And I believe that they were built there to mark these portal areas because, you know, they have a history of paranormal phenomena around them, and they seem to be increasing now.
Exactly.
People are getting all kinds of photographs up there, picking up all kinds of EVP near these things, having experiences with seemingly hooded dimensional beings. So,
the hooded beings. They're interesting. Ben, I'm monopolizing the guest here. Did you have a...
This is fascinating. I don't even know what to say.
Well, I like Phil so much because he gets it. I mean, so many guests, and we try to explain the multiverse thing, that they'll go on with the spiritualist approach as if they understood.
They'll be like, oh, yeah, I know what you're saying, and then go back to spiritualism.
Yeah, that sort of thing. Well, let me ask you the second question related to this Pomfret case, Phil. This, of course, now we fast forward, as they say, about 38 years to a couple of years ago. And there was a group investigating this particular site, and they were very, very interested in EVPs. And they had a conversation with a fellow who claimed he was Jonathan Randall, who was one of the big cheeses, son of the founder of this place, and that was about the time of the American Revolution, this sort of thing. Now, obviously, if there's some sort of a device involved, and if this guy is who he says he was, or is, or whatever, then regardless of the simultaneity of the worlds, then I doubt if in his timeline he'd have a device of some kind. Is it possible, if it really was Jonathan Randall, which I highly doubt, could he have been having this conversation while he was dreaming? Or what are the possibilities here if he didn't have a radio?
I don't know what the possibilities are in that. I mean, there's a possibility that, for example, in these other dimensions that are close by to us, there are intelligent beings here that do connect with us. And this seems to be the case in some of the EVP. It goes beyond the human sense to the something that doesn't seem to be human. And at times, it actually it may take on the identity of someone who you may want to hear from, or a name that you're familiar with. Mm-hmm. There's so much possibilities here. Now, what I'm doing is, I'm experimenting with this, and I'm saying to myself, these people, they're not getting the picture here. They're using the crowded AM band. They don't even know why it works on the AM band and not on a quieter frequency, because the EVP on these radio things, they need the AM carrier to piggyback on so they could be heard because the energy coming over, which I believe is interdimensional, is so low. So the possibilities here, I believe that, go down to about 200 kilohertz, 300 kilohertz, scan between 2 and 400 kilohertz, use that band, but induce an artificial dead carrier in order for the EVP to ride on. This way, you will have a quiet band and you will be able to hear that EVP and it won't get cut off and it won't be distorted by that crowded AM commercial band signal. I've tried to discuss this with a lot of these people who are doing this, but they just don't get it. I mean, it's too complex for them.
Yeah.
Also, in this particular frequency in the long wave band, you tune into the magnetosphere of the Earth. It's my belief that these signals originate because there are twists and bends in the magnetosphere at particular locations overhead. I don't know if they're coming in from like the same room that you're in, but it seems they could be coming or filtering through the magnetosphere. Now, I mean, this is another possibility here. Now, I've tuned
Okay, I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap it up for another break. I'm sorry, Phil. We'll come back with this thought. Talking about EVPs with Philip Imbrogno. Stay with us on Behind the Paranormal here on CBS New Sky Radio. Be right back.
CBS Radio's The New Sky. NewSkyRadio.com. This is the Lisa J. Smith Show.
So you say you want to be a rock star, so why don't you go ahead and be one? This is Lisa J. Smith. You can listen to me every day at 3 o'clock Eastern. Lisa J. Now, right here at CBS Radio, The Sky.
Look up to the sky. Psychic Radio is now CBS Radio's The Sky. Reach out, NewSkyRadio.com. Psychic Radio is now CBS Radio's The Sky. Back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Call now 248-545-SOUL. New skyradio.com. Believe.
And we are back, and our conversation today is with Philip Imbrogno, scientist, author, and expert in the paranormal in all sorts of different ways, and one who takes a thinking perspective, which we appreciate, and believes in the multiverse theory, which we also appreciate. Now, I was going to suggest, Phil, as we were talking, I had to interrupt you about the EVP situation here. I was going to talk about several possibilities that have arisen in our work, and one is the suggestion by physicists that, by some physicists anyway who believe in this, that the laws of physics may vary from parallel world to parallel world. And that, because, in quantum physics, all things that are possible exist somewhere or somewhen from that point of view. So do you think this might have something to do, different laws of physics, with how easily some of these people, or whatever they are, tend to be able to communicate with us from wherever or whenever they may be?
In a parallel universe, you might have different laws of physics taking place, but the basic construction of the universe is, with strings that produce what we call so-called particles. In different universes, you may have different versions of these particles, which would give you an entirely different physics. But in our universe here, and our universe, by the way, is composed of at least 10 dimensions. In these other dimensions in our universe, I believe that the same laws of physics that are in operation here are also in operation there. But like I said, in a parallel universe, this may be an entirely different story, because you may have the antiparticles of the particles that we have here. Now, EVP, whether it's done by digital or radio, is coming in on a signal. So it's writing in on a signal to get to that receiver. And the fact is that, it's most likely electromagnetic in nature. Electromagnetic energy is photons. The only difference between a radio wave and a UV wave is the energy of the photons. But photons have a tendency to follow the curvature of space. So therefore, they would be restricted to each dimension in each universe. Only under very certain circumstances in which space is curved can this photonic energy enter from one dimension to another. And that curvature could only be, it doesn't have to be very large. It could be the size of a molecule of hydrogen, 10 to the minus 64, centimeters. Come on. So it doesn't take much for that signal to get into our world.
Well, okay, yeah, I'm with you. Let me just point out another experience that I've had. Ben has not had this yet, but talking about the curvature of time and space, because Einstein talked liberally about that. When we have been in situations, particularly me, throughout the years that I've done this, and heard, say, at Pomfret, this ox cart driver that we couldn't see, or hearing farm implements banging together in other places, or people talking or whatever, dogs. And when you run, and I've had this happen invariably, when you run toward that sound, people have asked, will you get sucked into another world? Well, I suppose maybe that's possible, but it hasn't happened to me yet as far as I'm aware. But when you run toward it and you get to where you heard it, it's just over there. Or you run toward that, it's just over here. And immediately I thought, curvature of time and space. So how would that certainly seems to fit with what you're saying.
Well, that's like the flute I'm hearing, no matter where I went, it was, just around the corner.
Absolutely. Like the gold pot of the gold at the end of the rainbow.
Have you ever seen, Star Trek The Next Generation, and they have that holodeck? And the holodeck is really just a room, okay? But yet they could keep on walking around in circles and think they're walking in a straight line. Basically, that's what we're doing. We're actually walking around the curvature of space and not going into that other dimension. How that information is filtering into ours, the fourth dimension, let's say, which is supposed to be time, I don't really know. the sounds could even be coming from overhead or under the ground and filtering in. The portals that are opening up, like I said, could be the size of a molecule, and you would still hear the sounds coming through because it doesn't need that much energy to filter into our world. So, there's so many possibilities here, and, I could use theoretical physics to try to explain some of this, but unless there's more experimentation in the field, they're going to have a big budget, and they're going to study this for 5 years, and then at the end of the study, produce a paper. Is EVP real or not? Is it dimensional? What's going on here? I think that's the only way we're going to solve the problem. Researchers like myself and you and so on, we get little bits of information because we really don't have the resources to explore this further. This requires an in-depth and scientific investigation.
Yeah. Ben had a question.
Yeah, so if the membranes, everywhere, we think that the membranes everywhere are just, they're getting thinner and thinner. So would the EVPs be more prevalent everywhere else, or is it just certain areas where they're prevalent?
Yeah, membranes being the term some physicists use for boundaries between worlds.
Yeah, well, the membrane, if we're talking about other dimensions, okay, you see, we have to remember that, they're calling it a brain, by the way, B-R-A-N-E,
yeah.
Yeah, and this brain, for example, is not flat. It's twisted in circles in some areas, and it's in motion. So there are times when one part of the brain is going to overlap another part of the brain. For example, the brain that's coming closer to us right now that I believe, into our dimension may be the reason why we're seeing an increase in UFOs, paranormal phenomena, and EVP is getting more prominent. And I think that, this happens periodically. And if you look back in history, there are times where people have had more paranormal experiences, and then they disappear, and then they reappear.
Very true. I got to stop you again, Phil. I'm sorry we got another break.
Okay.
So we'll be right back with this fascinating conversation here on Behind the Paranormal on CBS News Sky Radio. Stick with us.
Psychic Radio. PsychicOnAir.com. The Wake Up Call with Ellen Tom.
So you're the first kid on the block, and you can prove it. Because there's similar prototypes, but nothing quite as good as yours. Yes. Yours has more than one application.
Yes, my God, you're brilliant.
Hi, it's Tom Force. Reverend L. Newman and I are here Monday nights, 7 till 9, prime time, Eastern time in the United States, with Wake Up Call on Psychic Radio.
Psychic Radio. We know you're listening. Life is a journey. Let us be your guide. Reach out on the net now, PsychicOnAir.com.
Look for Psychic Radio on your AOL radio player.
Know that you feel me somehow. You're the closest to heaven that I'll ever be, and I don't wanna go home right now. And all I could taste is this moment, and all I can breathe is your light. And sooner or later it's over. I just don't want. And I don't want the world to see me, 'cause I don't think that they'd understand. When everything's meant to be broken, I just want you to know who I tears that ain't coming, all the moment of truth in your eyes, when everything feels like the movies, yeah, you bleed just to know you're alive. And I don't want the world to see me, 'cause I don't think they'd understand.
CBS Radio's The Sky. Back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Call now 248-545-SOUL. New skyradio.com.
And we are continuing our riveting conversation on Behind the Paranormal here with Phil Imbrogno, scientist, author, and paranormal expert par excellence, and also advocate of the multiverse theory. Now, Phil, before we proceed, I wanted to take at least a few minutes for you to explain the difference between multiple worlds and other dimensions.
Okay. Multiple universes. For example, imagine this. We look up into the sky through a telescope and we see all these different galaxies and so on. That the edge of the universe from our perspective out to about 20 billion light years right now. Now, there's enough matter in space that we can see and what we can't see that actually curves space into like a bubble. Now, that's our universe. Everything in there that we can see is called the Hubble volume. Now, that's our universe. It's one bubble universe. How big it is across, nobody really knows. But there are other universes out there that are also bubble universes that are separate from us. Imagine, like when people blow hundreds of bubbles and maybe 10 of them or so, they stick together on top of each other and they form
just
like
the analogy we use, yep.
Yeah, and so, but these bubble universes are around each other more or less four-dimensionally where they interact. Now, universes that are connected, I'll go back to the bubble reference, you see two bubbles connected together. These are parallel universes, okay? These are universes in which matter can actually flow from one section to another, providing that the conditions are right, singularities,
the open
black
system.
holes.
Okay.
And so on. Now, string theory tells us that there are 10 dimensions plus the brain that we exist on. These dimensions are in each universe. So every universe has at least 11 dimensions, and you don't have to go out in space to find these other dimensions. They're all around. But we can only see our physical dimension in space. But these other dimensions we cannot see because they exist at angles that we cannot turn to or walk into. Because when you walk, actually the theory says that the brain is moving because the particles in your body are moving with the brain, and the brain follows the curvature of where it's at, and it can't go into another part of the brain. So these are other dimensions. These other dimensions are physical places. They are physical places that are not like, magical with energy and so on. They're composed of the same particles that make up our dimension. Now, these parallel universes may have different particles, the mirror images of our particles. So the thing is that how do these dimensions cross over? Well, if we are able to curve space, it could overlap into these other dimensions. Research is being done right now about projecting very powerful electromagnetic pulses. The electromagnetic pulse is actually a rain of photons, and that actually presses up against the brain, the curvature of space, pushing it into this other dimension, causing a temporary overlapping, allowing for us to perceive that other dimension and that other dimension to perceive us. Perhaps somebody in another dimension has already done this, and this is why we see an increase in UFOs and other paranormal phenomena.
Well, this does seem to happen naturally from time to time. People,
I'm sure it does, yes. I'm sure it also does, yes.
Cases on our files of people, simply tripping and falling and ending up in a different neighborhood or whatever.
Oh yeah, different time too.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry to say we're running out of time here, and we're going to definitely have Phil back, as we always try and do frequently, to talk about these fascinating phenomena, because we've got more questions. I wanted to talk about EVPs and UFOs, and also EVPs, if you can call them that occur without any simply brain to brain, that kind of communication. But we haven't got time, and I did want to give Phil a chance to talk about his own work.
Yeah, so tell us about Files from the Edge.
Well, Files from the Edge has nothing to do really with UFOs. It's all the paranormal cases that I've accumulated over the years, and actually some of my own impersonal investigations. So it borders on, it uses the multiverse theory, the idea of multiple dimensions also, to tie it in with paranormal phenomena, because for years I've had these cases sitting in my files, and until I, finally worked on this whole theoretical area in physics, they all didn't make sense, and now they are all starting to make sense. And Files from the Edge is my cases presented. Some have been in my files for over 30 years.
Okay, and people can get that from Amazon and the usual sources?
Yeah, Amazon, the bookstores, you call Lou Allen, 1-800-THE-MOON, they got special deals on it and so on.
Okay.
But that's it, and my research continues.
Good. And you said there's another book coming as well soon.
Yes, in December I have a book coming out called Ultra-Terrestrial Contacts, which in fact centers on my investigation into people who claim contact with a non-human intelligence and other dimensional intelligence, so on. In that study, I included the whole spectrum, from people who think they're communicating with angels or demons or jinn, to extraterrestrials, to, whatever. Every contact case I explored, and I present the most, I would say, the most convincing ones in that study.
Excellent. Okay, well, we always warn people, be careful what you're talking to and what you say. So we want to give our best again to Phil Imbrogno and his excellent work. Going to have him back real soon. And Phil, give our best to Rosemary Ellen Guiley, who is working with this project.
I'm going to see her on Thursday. We're going down to the book thing in New York City.
Excellent.
At the Javits Center.
Oh, okay, very good. Well, safe travel to you, and we'll be talking to you very soon.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Okay, folks, Phil Imbrogno, our good friend, chemist and scientific educator, paranormal investigator for 30 years or more, and wonderful points of view that he has that I think can really change things that need to be changed in the paranormal.
So, moving on, don't forget our next 3-hour Rendlesham Forest UFO broadcast. We're planning another panel discussion this time with some different former USAF witnesses. We'll have Larry Warren back, but also Jim Peniston and John Burroughs. That will be on Sunday, June 20th, when we will again combine shows with our friends Dave and Tom Jones of Caps Paranormal here on CBS New Sky Radio Sunday lineup.
And stay tuned for Caps Paranormal coming up right after us. They're twice as long as we are, and just as worthy of a good listen as I hope we are too. You want to check, of course, our website, behindtheparanormal.com, for upcoming guests, past guests, information about shows that we're doing.
And all our podcasts.
Absolutely. All our podcasts are available for free download. And you can subscribe to our newsletter as well.
So many thanks to our producer, Will Kosnick, and we'll see you right here next Sunday, May 30th at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific on CBS New Sky Radio and www.newskyradio.com, when our guest will be Robert Hastings, expert on UFOs and other interesting nuclear weapons.
Yeah, well, the interest between the nuclear weapons and UFOs, that's pretty interesting as well. It's all right here, CBS New Sky Radio, newskyradio.com. Stay tuned now for Caps Paranormal, and
in the meantime, check out our Saturday show at 11 a.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific on WOON 1240 a.m. in southeastern New England and onworldwide.com. Also, you can hear our rebroadcasts of Behind the Paranormal on Saturdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific, right here on CBS Psychic Radio.
And that New England-based show is going to be moving to another time slot. We'll tell you about that on that show. In the meantime, we leave you with a thought from the great poet, educator, historian, author, actress, playwright, activist, producer, and director, Maya Angelou. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived. But if we face it with courage, it need not be lived again.
See you next week.